hit like, and subscribe. You're watching the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel.
Peace, family. This is your brother, Marc Lamont Hill. You are watching the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel. Welcome to Night School. Every night here on the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel, we hold Night School, where we break down the most controversial topics, the most engaged debates, the most interesting subjects being bandied about in the world today. And tonight is absolutely no different. We have an incredibly important conversation that I've been wanting to have for a long time. Even before President 47, Donald J. Trump, was reelected, there was a very important conversation happening all over this country, in the halls of higher education, in the boardrooms of corporate America, in coffee shops, in everyday conversations. People were talking about the state of American education. That's a perennial topic. It's a perennial debate. Are we moving in the right direction? Are our schools failing us? Are our schools preparing us for the future? All of these things. And when it comes to the Black community, those conversations have been even more intense, even more fraught, even more complicated. And so I wanted to really spend 2025 having these conversations in a lot of different ways. One of the ways that I want to have the conversation is to think about what it means for Donald Trump to be president at this moment in Black educational history. What does it mean for Donald Trump to be overseeing policies and procedures, to be overseeing departments that shape the educational lives, the educational outcomes, the educational futures of Black people around the country? But I don't want to just talk about Donald Trump, because these conversations, as I said, begin before Donald Trump. They begin before Joe Biden. They begin before Obama. They are conversations that we have to constantly wrestle with, that we have to constantly oversee. And so I was already trying to have a conversation. Then, I'll be honest with you, something happened. I read this incredibly interesting article in the New York Times about Black men disappearing at HBCUs. Now, that was something that I hadn't thought about before. I knew that the conversation on HBCUs was interesting, and I knew there was a conversation about Black men in higher education and that they were getting outpaced by women. At least that's what I understand. But the conversation about Black men disappearing from HBCUs, that's the one place I thought we were plentifully represented. Turns out we're not. At Howard University, only 19% of students are Black men. 19%. That means that 4 out of 5 students at Howard University are women. Across all HBCUs, that number has dropped from 38% in 1976 to just 26 today. So the average HBCU, it ain't just Howard or Spelman or Marc. You go to Dell State, you go to Lincoln, you go to Cheney, 1 out of 4 students is a man. The rest, what's happening? And one more piece before I bring in my guest who's going to help break this all down for us. Non-Black students are now making up as much of the student body as Black men. That means you go to the average HBCU campus, you'll see more white people on campus than you will brothers. Now, you may say, why does it matter? If you're in this classroom at night school, you're probably not asking that, but some of y'all might ask that question. Why does this matter? Well, it matters because when Black men lose access to higher education, the ripple effects hit everything: jobs, wealth, family stability. The data is clear. The entire wealth gap, the Black-white income gap as well, is driven by what happens to Black men economically. Now, Black women are in the mix too, but Black women are excelling in ways that Black men aren't right now. But instead of fixing this crisis, and this is a crisis, we're at a moment, and this is why I will bring up Donald Trump, where we're moving the wrong way. Donald Trump is actually slashing programs that were meant to support Black male achievement. How does he do it? The boogeyman of DEI. And of course, because he's 12 years old, that's too generous. Because he's 6 years old, he says, he who smelt it dealt it. So he says that the people making DEI to end racism are actually the racists. So what's going on? Why are Black men enrolling and graduating at a lower rate? And what happens when they don't enroll and graduate? I need somebody to help me break this down. So I brought in somebody who I think is literally maybe the leading voice in the country on this topic of higher education and Black men. Somebody who is a decorated scholar, but also a very prominent public voice. I've known him a long time. He's the author of a new book that is coming out, I believe, in June. I'm so excited about this book. I've been waiting for him to unpack this and for the whole world to see, so the world can really bear witness to his brilliance. The book is called Let's Talk About DEI, Productive Disagreements About America's Most Polarizing Topics. The man, the myth, the legend. Please give it up for Dr. Shaun Harper. My brother, good to see you.
Good to see you, Marc. Thanks for having me.
What's going on, man? I was actually embarrassed that I didn't know these numbers, particularly at HBCUs. If you told me, at Penn State or USC where you work, or City College or the Graduate Center where I work, like, sure, fine, right? But HBCUs, we not up in there either.
Well, we are and we aren't, right? So first off, Marc, thanks for having me. We are night school, but I'm still in my office on campus at USC. The sun is still shining outside.
You're working too hard, man. You got tenure. You're working too hard.
Yeah, I know. So to be sure, this is not a new issue. It is a problem that has long plagued HBCUs. It's just worsening the further we go along and do far too little about it. So I just want to acknowledge that it's not new, but it is getting worse. I do want to acknowledge two other things, though, right, that I think are really important. It's really important for Black women to enroll in college and attain degrees. So I just want to applaud and appreciate our sisters for their extraordinary achievement. One doesn't necessarily have to occur at the expense of others. We could continue to expand college pathways for Black women while also simultaneously dealing with the gender gap that leads to too few Black men. So I want to put that on the table.
That's important. Thank you for stipulating that, because I think too often it becomes a quote unquote gender war, or it becomes a conversation about Black men achieving, almost like they're taking our jobs or they're taking our spots. And no, we want Black women to thrive. We just need Black men to be in that conversation too.
Yeah, let's take Xavier University in New Orleans. Xavier has earned a reputation for its extraordinary track record of producing Black physicians. It is the largest undergraduate producer of Black folks who go on to medical school.
Wow.
They've earned that, right? At Xavier, 76% of the undergraduates there are women, and most of them are Black women, right? Look, we need more Black women doctors, period. So, I salute Xavier for playing its outsized role in the production of Black women physicians. We just also need some brothers to be in the same, hospitals and doctors' offices as them. So there's that. Look, you asked, why is this happening? For one, too little emphasis is placed on increasing young men's interest in college and helping young men to understand the value of college. Notice I said young men. I didn't say young Black men. I just said young men, period. Across all racial groups, and across, women and men comprise 41% of college enrollments. Women comprise 59%. This is inclusive of white people, Asian people, Latino, Latinx people. So there's a gender gap across all racial groups. It's just more exacerbated among men. So
that's so helpful to know for people out there, because I think people might assume the opposite. And, obviously 100 years ago, that wasn't the case, but now you're saying women just go to school more than men. It's 6 to 4 in every community on average. So the fact that we 7 to 3 or 8 to 2 is bad, but it's not out of nowhere. Okay, that's helpful, because they always try to make us pathological. You know what I mean? So
right.
I always like to know that kind of data. That's helpful.
Yeah. So this is a challenge that spans all racial groups. One other thing that I do want to acknowledge, Show, and I'm working on this right now. I'm working on my second film. Have me back to talk with you about my first film, but I'm going to focus on the second one right now.
Oh,
my second
okay.
film is focused on trying to understand why young men do go to college. There are 8 million young men right now who are enrolled in colleges and universities. 8 million.
Mm.
And some of them are Black. A lot of them are Black. A lot of them are at HBCUs. So, most of the attention is understandably placed on why are there so few men? Why are they not interested in college? Why are they choosing alternative, pathways to careers? That's a big problem. I'm not suggesting that we ought not focus on that, but hiding in plain sight are 8 million dudes who actually did go to college. So I'm trying in this research project, and ultimately in the film that I'm going to make from it, I'm trying to highlight, these young men and why they ultimately chose to go to college. And I'm hoping that it will inspire other young men to see college as a viable pathway for them. And I'm hoping that it will also be instructive for policymakers, for K-12 schools, for college recruiters and others who just keep running in circles trying to figure out why aren't we getting more men to apply.
Mm. Let's take a step back for a minute, since you brought in this interesting piece of information, which is that in general, women go to college more than men. What is that about? Why?
Well, part of it is that young men are socialized more intensively to see college as not being all that valuable, right?
Okay.
As seeing, as they're socialized to think about, other profitable pathways to careers. That's a thing that happens on TV shows. It happens in video game chats as, people are playing games with their homies. So there's that. There's also, frankly, not enough gender specific pre-college preparation programs to get young men interested in college, right? Like, the presumption is that if we introduce a college access program to teenagers, that is going to appeal across a range of genders. Well, actually, what ends up happening is that those things tend to appeal more to girls, which I understand that, but we need more gender specific things focused on, helping young men see the value of college.
So, and we can circle back to this at another time, but just so I'm clear, that would mean going to, say, the average high school and talking to boys about particular careers that speak to their interests or their, I know, for example, young men are often socialized into sports. So letting somebody know that they could do, you ain't gonna make the NFL, but maybe you could be a physical therapist. Maybe you could coach, but maybe to coach, you got to be a teacher, and to be a teacher, you got to go to college and get this guy. Is it that kind of stuff? Is it like sort of speaking to where they already are, or is there something else we should be doing with boys to kind of direct them into the pipeline?
Yeah. So it's what you just said for sure. And let's stay in the sports for a moment. Now, in this new era of NIL, name, image, and likeness, one can actually earn millions of dollars on his brand in college as a college athlete in ways that he couldn't, say, 5 years ago. So I think that gives us sort of a really enticing ball to throw, pun very much intended, at young men who are interested in sports. There's that. But Marc, what I think is also important is that it's hard to aspire to something that you haven't seen. As you know, you and I have been homies a long time, dear friends, as a matter of fact. I didn't grow up with a lot of college educated men around me. Very, very few, as a matter of fact. So for me, not having met very many men who went to college, it was hard to aspire to that. So part of it has to also be introducing young men to men who are in a range of professions, and their college degrees help them get there.
So all of that makes sense to me. I think the thing that surprises me is the HBCU piece of this, because I don't know, I would think that we'd be overrepresented there, because that's where we do have the examples. That's where we do have the faculty. That's where we do have the people that look like us. That's where we,
Well, we got to get the guys there. That's the challenge, right? We got to get them there.
Gotcha.
So, Marc, my first grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in 2019 funded some work around HBCU enrollments. And one of the things that I discovered is that Black folks, women, men, and genderqueer, were indeed applying to HBCUs. What I also discovered is that HBCUs were actually accepting them. Many HBCUs have long prided themselves, including the one that I graduated from, Albany State in Albany, Georgia, right? HBCUs have long prided themselves on providing access to folks, as opposed to denying a lot of folks. They've never hung their hat on sort of, we're excellent by the number of people we reject, yeah. Right? So the acceptance rates are beautifully high at HBCUs. Where it all falls apart, Marc, is in yield. The yield numbers are atrocious. They for instance, I'll give you
just for the audience's benefit. When we say yield, we're saying that 10,000 people apply. Just picking an arbitrary number. 10,000 people apply.
Yes.
Let's say they admit 5,000 of them.
Yes.
That's the acceptance. That's the acceptance rate. But the yield of that, if only 1,000 come. That's the yield.
Exactly. So let's take Clark Atlanta, for example. Last year, Clark Atlanta University received 27,672 applications. That's a lot of applications. That's pretty good. I like that. They admitted 65% of the people who applied. That's a reasonably high acceptance rate. I like that. Only 6% of the people that they accepted ultimately enrolled at Clark. That I don't like.
And what's happening between acceptance and yield?
They're low for everybody. They're low across all genders, but they tend to be even lower among men.
When we look at the data more closely, and I don't know if we're there yet in terms of the research, because I don't know the field, but is it that people are applying with no intention of attending the application? Is it, or are they applying and going somewhere completely different?
Look, it's a cocktail of explanations. Let's acknowledge that some folks are really, really brilliant, including most of the folks who apply to these schools. Said they're brilliant, right? And they have multiple options. Sure, I'll go with that. That's one part of it. But 6% though, like 94% of them are gonna go somewhere else. I'm not sure about that. So I think that what ends up happening is there is an affordability problem. People actually want to go to school.
Okay.
They're applying because they want to go to school. They're not just applying just for kicks. They actually want to go to school. But figuring out how to afford it becomes a challenge. The elimination of the United States Department of Education will certainly exacerbate and worsen that challenge, right? So that's part of it. Affordability is a part of it. I think another part of it, if we're being, I'm being completely honest, HBCUs often don't have the technological resources and infrastructure that it requires to do yield well. For 5 years, I worked as an admissions officer in graduate admissions, and I know how important yield is. I mean, listen,
Yeah.
that's the bottom line right there, right? Like you do all this recruiting, all this admitting, all this stuff, but you actually got to get people to say, yeah, I'm coming and pay their deposit, right? So, like predominantly white institutions, a lot of them have all sorts of software, all sorts of marketing things that
Yeah.
they use to market to admitted students to get them to ultimately come. HBCUs don't have those resources. So it falls apart at the yield stage.
Wow. So there's another piece of this that I can't help but think about, and that is Donald Trump's, commitment may be understating it. But I want to say his commitment to dismantling so many of the advances that we've made in education across the board in the last 30 years, from the kind of literature that we can have in classrooms to the kind of curriculum we can develop, to the type of students we can admit, to the type of considerations we can make about admissions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what's interesting is he's actually lately seemingly not focusing on the HBCU per se, but focusing on the DEI. Yeah. And I'm sure the DEI impacts HBCUs in some ways, but I think for most of us, when we think DEI, we're thinking no longer are these Black students or brown students or whomever going to be able to have access to these elite white institutions, that have historically been racist and were compelled legally to take seriously diversity, equity, and inclusion, and if not legally, socially and culturally, especially after George Floyd. And now it's like they undid all that. And so now it just seems like we're not going to get into those places anymore. Is Trump's war on the DEI initiatives actually potentially going to blow back in a way that sends us back to the HBCUs? Like how like the boys had to go to Fisk. Like, is it going to be one of them situations?
Yeah. Listen, let's put a very quick pin in that. I want to do three things. I'll do them very quickly.
Take your time, Pastor.
First, I understand that there are lingering critiques of the Biden-Harris administration, but facts are facts. The fact is, if we're talking about HBCUs, the investment from the federal government during the 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration was the highest that it had ever been in the history of the United States. It wasn't even close. Like if we think about like sort of who's number two, it ain't even close, right? Like them folks invested in HBCUs.
You said they top two, it ain't number two.
It ain't. Listen, I'm telling you.
But stay there for 1 second, because Trump's whole line is no one did more for HBCUs than me. Is that a lie or is that a misrepresentation?
No, that's a lie. That's a whole lie, right? Like it is quantifiably false.
Okay.
So number one, the Biden-Harris administration's investment into HBCUs was the highest ever by a long shot. Okay. Second thing I want to acknowledge is that when we talk about affordability, part of what makes enrolling in college so unattractive to young men is debt. They don't want to go into debt. I understand that. So what I also want to acknowledge is that the Biden-Harris administration forgave $188 billion with a B, $188 billion in student loans. 5.3 million Americans benefited from that. Many of them were Black.
Absolutely.
I'm one of them. My loans were forgiven. I'm one of the 5.3 million people who benefited from the $188 billion in student loan forgiveness. So look, I think it's really important to just acknowledge that. Here's the third thing. On day one of his second term, Donald Trump signed a whole notebook of executive orders.
Yes.
Ain't it curious, right? That in the 70 whatever number of executive orders, it was banning DEI this, banning the Office of Women there, banning this and that. And, the White House initiative on Hispanics in higher education, that was banned on the first day. What wasn't banned? The White House initiative on HBCUs. Ain't it curious that the one on Hispanics, the one on Asians, the one on Native Americans and indigenous people. Those things were banned via executive order on day one. But yet this man held in his pocket the HBCU.
Because he loves us so much?
No, that ain't it. That ain't it.
Help us think why. Because there's some Negroes in this audience who are Trumpers who are going to be like, see, that's the proof.
I don't know, Mark. What do you think? How do you make sense of it?
I have such a profound distrust for Donald Trump and such a cynical read of him. I would imagine he's holding that card purely for political gain.
Well, yeah, exactly.
And he didn't, cutting after sort of mobilizing Black communities around anti-trans, anti-LGBTQ, anti-immigrant sentiments. It sort of made sense to put them on a chopping block first, but be like, y'all, you cool, so that people still operate from the mythology. And I'm guessing here, operate from the mythology that Trump actually cares about us, and that that we're on his side against this imaginary enemy.
Correct. And it sets up the continuation of this myth that ain't nobody done more for y'all than me, right? Which is this is patently false. I think you asked me a question about DEI. Let's get to that, right? Because folks,
break that down for me, because I'm like, does DEI? Because I'm, if we think of DEI as something that's going to primarily operate in PWIs, does that then, which is I'm not saying that's true, but that's sort of how we've been conditioned to think about it. Does that then mean, following that logic, that then we end up maybe at HBCUs more because we can't go to the PWIs anymore, like a blessing in disguise?
Perhaps, maybe. It's a big maybe. We do have to be able to afford to get there and pay to be there. There's that. So, Mark, I said we would talk about my first film at some other time. Let's do it now. Right now, I'm in the throes of making my first film, and it's about the elimination of DEI initiatives on college campuses. I'm exhausted. It's why I'm still in my office right now. I've been traveling all across the country these past 3 weeks, interviewing students, chief diversity officers, current ones, and people who've been fired, subject matter experts, so on and so forth. My gut told me to go to some HBCUs as a part of that, to not presume them to be exempt from the politicized dismantling of DEI initiatives. I'm so glad that I did, because I've already learned a lot. What I've learned is that a bunch of students who are Black at Southern University and at other land-grant HBCUs were left hanging in the balance for days because their USDA fellowships have been placed on pause. And those folks were like, it's this HBCU program. And they were like, am I going to still be able to go to school? I'm on a full ride on this United States Department of Agriculture fellowship that the Trump administration has placed on pause, right? That was incredibly stressful for them and their families.
Yeah.
I've also talked to a sister who was the highest performer in her internship class last year at a company. And the company made her an offer because she was the highest performing. Let's be very clear. She was not any version of anybody's DEI hire. This sister was extraordinary. They had to take the offer back because it was part of a initiative to diversify the company. And the company has, dismantled that because of the political climate. So now this sister, who had understandably put all her eggs in that one basket because, she came out of the internship and they're like, yo, we can hire you.
Right.
Like, now she's scrambling, right? Trying to figure out, like, what does this mean for her life? I can't tell you the number of other students who've also talked about the loss of internships that they were supposed to be doing this summer that they can't do anymore because companies or federal agencies, state agencies have yanked all of that stuff back under the guise of DEI compliance.
Are they pulling this stuff back because they actually worry about legal enforcement, or is it that they don't want the kind of retribution from Trump, or is it we want to do this anyway and now we don't have to even pretend?
It's both. It's both. If it were only the former, right? Like, we don't want to get into a boxing match with Trump and lose our funding. If it,
Right.
if it were only that, they would at least use their platforms to convey that, right? They're not doing that. They just discontinuing the things in the dark and writing emails to students telling them, sorry, we're not doing this no more. It is so cruel because these are talented young Americans who are Black, who absolutely earned these kinds of opportunities. They're not DEI hires. Even if they are accessing these opportunities through DEI programs, they go there and they show that they deserve to be there. Yeah, man, it's cruel.
Cruelty is a word that I hear for Trump's administration when we talk about the border, when we talk about DEI, when we talk about war. Cruelty is across the board. How do we get from a space of cruelty to a space of maybe not investment, but I guess let me put it differently. I know we can't change Trump's ethics or morals or tenor, but we can redirect him. What kind of pressures need to be applied to move the Trump administration in a direction that actually makes life? I'm going to talk about Black men just for now. We can talk about Black women in a different segment because I think that's important as well. But how do we move them in a way that at least opens up possibilities for Black men to achieve in education more? Again, knowing that before Trump, this was a problem. 20 years ago, it was a problem. But knowing at this moment it's getting more and more precarious, what do we do? How do we get somewhere else?
I think first we have to help people understand the impact that these policies are having on people, right? I was watching the news the other day. I know we're supposed to be talking about Black men. I'm gonna talk about a white woman real fast. I was watching the news the other day, and there was a white woman who had a federal job in West Virginia. She ain't got that job anymore because she's one of the people who, who was affected by Doge and all the closures. And she was a Trump voter, and she was just talking about how devastating this was to have lost her $30,000 job, and how she was having voters remorse, and she just expected more of the person that she voted for. There was something about watching that, because I'm not a cruel person. Like, I felt for her.
Are you a better person than me?
Look, man.
I mean, let me just say this. I feel bad for anybody catching hell, and I feel bad for the immigrants, and there's lots of people who I feel bad for who got sold a bill of goods and ended up in a bad spot.
Right.
But some of these people, I don't know. No extra charge.
Listen, man.
You already know what I'm about to say.
Listen, I felt bad for her because, like you said, like I feel badly for anybody catching hell, because I know what that feels like. I grew up with a mama that was catching hell financially. Because we were super poor. Anyway, look, like here's my answer to your question though, like about what do we do? We have to we have to showcase the humanity of the folks who are being affected by these things. It's why I decided to write a film, or to produce a film rather, as opposed to write an article or write a book about this. I'm like, no. I need people to be on the screen. I need you to see their faces as they talk about the devastation and the loss and the trauma and so on. So I don't think that that's going to appeal to the Trump administration, to be sure. But what I do think it will do, it will appeal to more Americans.
Yes.
And, hopefully compel us to demand more from our government.
Before you go, Shaun, there's just a couple comments here that I think are interesting. Just to get your take on, but also really fast. So I made an assumption, and I don't want to wallow in ignorance. Is it wrong to assume that DEI does not impact HBCUs?
Oh, that's totally wrong. It absolutely impacts HBCUs.
Tell me why. How?
So again, those students that I was telling you about, who were at land grant HBCUs who had the USDA fellowship, and
That's a DEI. I see.
that. Then the internships for HBCU students, that's gone.
So I see it doesn't. So I see it affects them at that level, but like in terms of, for example, if I go to an and I don't know how this works. If I go to an HBCU and there is underrepresentation at the level of gender, or in like a like engineering or something, I'm still good.
Are you? It depends, because what this also does, right, is that HBCUs are they're exposed to the same legal confusion, is what I'm going to call it, right? Like a lot of PWIs are like, well, we don't know what's even legally allowable at this time. HBCUs are in that same boat. For instance, let's go with engineering at an HBCU, right? Let's say that the problem of the gender gap were reversed and there was an underrepresentation of women, as there often is, right, in engineering. Many HBCUs are like, can we do a thing now for young women that's focused on getting more young women into engineering careers? Or are we also then exposing ourselves to the legal risk of some white dude somewhere claiming that he is being discriminated against because there's no such program or initiative for him?
Oh God, I just want out. Wherever we are right now, I just want out. We got a comment coming in. Summertime Love said my son had to leave HBCU and I'm a single mom. I couldn't afford it. Tag 1991 said I'm a black man with a 4.0 GPA at my community college. I'm graduating in June and got into 10 universities for fall 2025, including 4 HBCUs. But I'm forced to settle on a state school because of cost.
I'm telling you, Marc, yield is the issue. Black folks, including Black men, are applying to HBCUs. HBCUs are accepting them, but it falls apart at the yield largely because of affordability.
Are all HBCUs operating in general from that challenge? In other words, I get Morehouse is expensive. I get that Spelman and Grambling and FAMU and are embedded are probably expensive. But there's over 100 HBCUs. Like, is the average open admit HBCU also going to be significantly more expensive on average than the average state school? Or I guess what I'm asking is it that we can't afford to go to HBCUs, or are we like looking at the wrong HBCUs?
Now, it could be that we might be looking at the wrong HBCUs. I'll give you that for sure.
Yeah, that's not a critique of anybody. I'm just curious because it might be the reason why you don't want to go. Like, it might be for good reason. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are schools that are stronger than others. You know what I mean? And if I say, well, I can't afford Morehouse, so I go to Morris Brown. Morris Brown's an extraordinary tradition. It's produced extraordinary people, but it's not the same resources right now as the rest of the AUC. So I could see why somebody might not make that choice.
Yeah, look, man, I went to Albany State, the HBCU that is an hour from my hometown. And I left there with, I left there with about $10 in debt. Like, my student loan debt there was like almost non-existent because it was so affordable to go there. I was an in-state resident. So I think that part of what we got to do, Marc, if we're talking about young men, we have to also expose them to a more holistic and multidimensional college choice process, so that they're not like making just random college choices. Like, all right, I'm gonna apply to Morehouse, Clark, and Hampton. Well, all 3 of those are private institutions.
Right.
If you grew up in Georgia like me and you grew up poor like me, you might want to apply to Albany State, Savannah State, and Fort Valley, the 3 public HBCUs that are actually a lot more affordable for in-state residents.
I think that's what I'm thinking about more and more as I understand the complexity of this. That's helpful. Somebody said, and we got just 2 questions left. One was from Educate to Free Us. who said Tennessee State University still owed billions of dollars. HBCUs are underfunded, but these red states are stealing their funding, and most HBCUs are in the South in red states. Is this true?
This is absolutely true. It's absolutely disgustingly true. Yes.
Wow. I don't know, y'all. I'm going to go on a limb here, Black people, and say, if they keep stealing your money and your resources and undermining your ability to go to education, to access education, maybe you should stop voting for them.
Yeah, that's a good limb. Yep, I'm on that limb with you.
I'm going to throw that out. I'm just going to throw that out there. And the last comment that I want to read comes from I'm not sure the brother's name, but thank you for the super chat, my brother. I appreciate your generosity. He said, subject men to an educational system with 90% female teachers and constant messaging that men are toxic. The system is performing as designed. Trump reforms family law, child support. It's a wrap. So this sounds like a Black a brother who's somewhat pro-Trump, maybe because reforming family law and child support doesn't sound like he's. I can't imagine Trump's going to reform it to make it easy, easier for women. But he's basically saying that school is misandrist, that men are hated in school, and that all throughout schools are a bunch of women teachers teaching men that men are bad, and that's why men bail out of school. I don't know enough about the data to speak to it, but this feels like a terrible argument to me.
Here's what I will say. Facts matter. Nearly 80% of K-12 school teachers are white, and the overwhelming majority of them are white women.
That is true.
Therefore, getting productive messaging about college going, about your Blackness, about Black identity, Black history, and so on and so forth is very challenging for Black girls and boys in K-12 schools. And
that
Black
makes sense to me.
Kids as well, for sure. So that part of it is absolutely true. Look, I didn't have my first Black male teacher until I was in the 7th grade, and he might have been my last one in my K-12 schooling experience. It was that man, Edward Morrow, who saw something in me that years and years and years of white women teachers did not see in me, right? Like, he encouraged my student leadership in the school, and that put me on the pathway to become, the person that I am now. So it does absolutely matter to have Black teachers and to have Black male teachers in K-12 schools. We need that. I think that is at least one variable in getting more young Black men exposed to college and excited about college.
That is actually encouraging. I have I've always sort of worried that when it comes to education, as long as our enemies, the empire, as long as the country is educating us, we don't have a good way out. And I'm inclined to still believe that. I'm inclined to believe in general that Black folk ain't gonna get free as long as our oppressors are educating us. But at the same time, I've always believed in Black people's ability to liberate ourselves and to operate with agency and to operate with a kind of radical purpose that gets us somewhere else. And in the era of Trump, I see a lot of deflated people. I see a lot of distracted people. I see a lot of confused people. I see a lot of ignorance, but I also see a lot of people who feel defeated. Some are just sitting out the next 3 years and gonna wait for the next train. Other people are just like, I'm gonna go for self. I'm gonna get my money. I'm gonna do whatever I got to do. And I talked to a lot of brothers who feel so estranged from, so disconnected from the educational system, particularly higher education, that I don't know what to do. You spend your life, you spend your career studying, brothers, in higher education. I know why you do it. I guess my question for you is, what message do you have for them? What can you tell them? What could you tell us that leaves us believing that it can get better in this moment?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to start by just reinforcing something that I said earlier. There are more than 8 million young men who are in college right now, and some of them are Black. And I ain't talking about just 200 or 300. I'm talking, you know, thousands upon thousands of them are Black. So, you know, I think when we look across the professions and we think about wealth, the wealthiest Black people in the United States went to college. I don't think it's the only pathway to wealth, but it is. If I were a betting man, I would place my bets over here on, you know, the long-standing pathway to the middle class and into wealth. And yeah, I think folks just have to continue to believe that that is gettable for themselves.
Mm. I promised the last question. I just saw this question pop up. The audience is asking you. They love you, and they got so many questions for you. He just said, "How is the department, Donald Trump eliminating the Department of Education, going to promote Black men teachers?" Just asking. Just say, forget the Black man teacher part for a second, and just say, even more broad, bigger. Sort of, does the attack or the emptying out, the liquidating of the Department of Education affect any of the stuff we're talking about?
It affects all of it. It affects all of it. None of these problems are going to get better without some infrastructure, without some accountability, and most importantly, without resources. The elimination of the Department of Education isn't just like sort of this like ideological idea, right? Like that's got money attached to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, this all of this is going to worsen, and we're going to see fewer Black male teachers. If you think that the state's taking on education, suddenly they're gonna catch religion and be like, you know what? We need some more Black male teachers, and we're gonna create space in our state budget to create pipeline initiatives. No, not gonna happen.
Fair. Well, thank you for keeping us informed, my dear brother. You know, Shaun Harper, y'all, is one of my favorite people. He's one of my dearest friends, but he's my frat brother. He's all the things, but he's also a very serious and careful scholar who I always lean on and look to for it's hard out here. That's all I can say, man. It's hard. And the times are getting worse and hope is dwindling, and your work, your voice, your leadership is one of those few bright spots that reminds us not just that we can win, but from my perspective that we will. So just thank you for everything you do.
Appreciate you, brother.
Love you, man.
Love
Let's
you
talk soon. Everybody, make sure you check out this brother's book too. It's a banger, to be sure. I ain't read it yet. I ain't never gonna lie to y'all, but only because I haven't had a chance. He ain't sent it yet, but when he does, when he sends me that book, I'm gonna read it. But I have yet to read anything from the good Reverend Dr. Shaun Harper that hasn't been amazing and hasn't been thoughtful and hasn't been path breaking. So when you get the opportunity, y'all, check out this book. It's called Let's Talk About DEI, Productive Disagreements About America's Most Polarizing Topics by Dr. Shaun Harper. And somebody's asking, so I got to answer. How can they see the film? When does it come in, and when what platforms?
Man, I'm working as hard as I can on this film. It's not done yet. We are about 90% done with filming. I'm going as fast as I can.
Okay. And so I as a filmmaker, I understand that, you know, I don't even like to give deadlines. I hate it for books, or definitely not for films, but it will be out sooner than later. And when it does, you'll come back on and you'll tell us the platform to find it.
For sure.
I hope, you know, I hope it's everywhere. And we'll do everything we can to make it everywhere. So again, just thank you. We love you, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Love you too, man.
Peace, everybody. That was Dr. Shaun Harper, one of the leading scholars of higher education in the United States right now. He has written and authored, co-authored, edited, co-edited so many books and articles. I can't even tell you, man. He's done so many big studies and small studies. He's mentored so many. He's done so much extraordinary work that I don't think there's anybody who really embodies the identity or the label of engaged scholar, engaged practitioner scholar, engaged researcher, engaged, public voice, public critic, whatever, all them titles. That's Shaun Harper. So check out his work, support his work. He's a professor at the University of Southern California. Prior to that, he's held positions in some of the most prestigious institutions in the country. He's super dope. And we appreciate him, and we appreciate you for watching, y'all. In the meantime, if you don't get his book today, pre-order it today. I'm trying to get my hands on a free copy. You're right, Bullet. I need me some free 99. But in the meantime, go read his earlier work. Go read his articles. Go pick up some of the books that he's published. We're grateful for all of it. And I think you'll be rewarded intellectually and maybe even spiritually and emotionally when you read Dr. Harper's work. So just make sure you do that. Anyway, that's it for Night School tonight, family. I appreciate y'all. I love y'all. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. And if you're so inclined, hit that join button. Become a monthly subscriber to the channel. When you do that, you give us the financial stability we need to do the work that we do every single day. It pays for staff. It pays for studio space. It pays for services, editing, promotion, marketing, all of it. We do it with your support. I don't have a corporate check coming. I don't have a major network underwriting what I do. I don't have anybody other than the people supporting me. This channel works from the people. So please consider donating your time by watching the channel, but also your treasure by becoming a member. For as low as $3.99 a month, you can become a member of the channel, and it really is super duper duper important and appreciated when you do that. Finally, I hear that baby crying. I think my wife gonna grab him. Don't be alarmed. He's taken care of. Finally, hit that Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, or Zelle, and make a one-time donation if you don't want to make the monthly commitment to a membership. I understand it's hard out here. Maybe you can't make a monthly commitment. That's fine. Maybe you don't want to. That's okay. Maybe I'm on a case by case. You got me on a trial basis. I appreciate and respect that. But regardless, I'm asking you to seriously consider supporting the channel with a one-time payment. Consider it tuition for the month. That makes sense. Consider it tuition for the month. By the way, shout out to you, Jalen Davis, for donating $5 to the channel. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. But as we start this month, we would love to go into the month with financial support. So if you could go to Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, or Zelle and drop anything you want, we'd be grateful. If you drop $1, I promise you, I'm grateful. If you drop $1 million, like I always say, I'll be a little more grateful. I ain't gonna lie. But if you drop anything in the middle, we're just as grateful. No amount is too big. No amount is too small. But if everybody watching right now were to drop $5, not 10, just 5. If everybody watching right now were to drop $5 in, we would meet most of our financial goals for the month. With 10, we'd make all of them. But if everybody watching were to just donate $5, we could make our financial goals for the month. So please just consider Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, or Zelle adding $5 to the pot. But regardless, we're going to be here. We're going to work hard. We're going to share content. We're going to bring the best guests. I'm going to continue to have the best production staff. We're going to do everything we can to make this thing as beautiful as possible, but we could do so much more with your support. And for those who have been giving your support, and that's most of you, thank you. Thank you for being you. Thank you for supporting us month after month. Thank you for helping build this into one of the most respected online educational sites, one of the most respected daily shows in the country. I'm grateful. I love y'all. And I can't wait to see you tomorrow. Peace.